Good morning. I'm Amanda Zimmerman, and this is Improvement Roulette, where each and every day in April, we are going to go through a Lean Six Sigma or business improvement tool to help your small business learn how to do their work better, safer, faster, and more efficient. What does that mean? That means less time that you spend on things that are not adding value for your customers, more time spent on things that are going to make you money and also align with your values, hopefully, right? I'm coming to you, as I said, every day this month in April to help you learn some of these tools, to find out which tools are going to help you the most. Now, all of us are going from this place where we were in COVID to now maybe we're in this post-COVID world, and I want to make sure that we have solutions for you that you can use to action and improve your businesses in this challenging time. It's a time where you really want to take all of those learnings and make them actionable. Now, I'm Amanda Zimmerman. I've been doing this for the last 10 years, helping businesses, and today's topic is an A3 on an Etsy store. Now, if you're thinking, what the heck is A3? What are you talking about? Don't worry, that's what we're going to talk about. All it means is a piece of paper. But in the larger picture, the A3 allows us to think in a way that we identify our root causes, we identify improvements that will address those, and we make sure that they stay in control. So an A3 is simply a paper size. It's about the size of a poster. So if you see this in other talks, you will see that really that's the size we're talking about, is about a poster-sized piece of paper. 11 by 14, I believe. And so I have here an A3, and you might notice in PowerPoint it seems quite small, but again, it's not going to stay this size, right? When we print it out, it gets quite big. Now, why would someone want to use an A3 even if they were like a solopreneur, like an Etsy store owner? They would want to use an A3 so that they go through this thinking step by step to make sure that they understand the problem that they're trying to solve. What is the challenge that you're trying to solve? What are the root causes that are causing you to maybe not meet whatever goal you're not meeting? How can we identify improvements that address those root causes, action them, and validate that they actually had the impact that we wanted? And then put into place controls. So if we go through this A3, we can see here we have the project title. This is where you can identify in general, what is it that I want to see change? Our background gives context. So let's say we have somebody else that works with us. We can easily grab this and give it to them, and they may be able to use it to train. They may be able to use it to see in the future why you've made the decisions that you've had. The next thing we have is our current state. This is where we are actually going to go get some data to understand how things are currently performing, what's working, what's not working. Then we're going to move to the analysis. This is where you're actually going to do some work to understand what are all the different variables that could be causing your goal, your performance against your goal to go up or down. Once we understand that, we can identify specific improvements to address those root causes. And then that we've actually seen that change and develop that control plan. Now, if you were with us yesterday and you watched the DMAIC instruction video, then this is going to be quite similar, but it's a one-pager. It's as much as possible simple. DMAIC projects, quite often, you'll have an entire PowerPoint deck. This is kept to one page. This forces you to be concise. So if you're not a solopreneur, if you're using this in a business, this is a great tool, especially like in academic spaces, where you're forcing people to be concise. We don't need a 38-page document. I want you to tell me everything that's important to know in one page. Now let's go ahead, as you already saw, and take a look at an example. So here's an A3 for an Etsy store owner. That Etsy store owner wants to increase her monthly sales by 10%. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at the A3. Whoops. Let's look at some of these details. So she wants to increase her average monthly sales. And she says here in her background, so that you kind of have an idea of where are we starting here? If anybody in your business picked this up, if anybody, maybe the administrative assistant that answers the calls in the front desk picked it up, if your mom picked it up, could they understand what the heck you're trying to look at, right? What is that context and background? That can be really important as well when you look at this in 2 or 3 years, when you look at this into the future. So in this example, she said, I started an Etsy store in March of 2020 selling personalized puzzles with children's name on them. And actually, I'm sorry, this should say 2018. It should say 2018 for the case study that I did this off of. So she started her store in 2018 with personalized puzzles. Now, what she saw in 2021, or what her assumption was at the time of taking on this project, was that her sales did not meet her monthly goals. So as she looked at the last few months, she felt that she wasn't meeting her goals. However, when she went and got the data, you can see based on this graph that her goals actually were not that different. She didn't have any significant changes that we were sure were going to continue over time. If anything, there may have been a decline earlier in the year that she didn't identify, right? Something maybe around summertime where her sales at the end of the summer started to go down, and that came to be her new average. So she was able to look at this and get a better idea of her average monthly sales and the number of orders that she received each month. It also gave her some insight into whether or not these changes were new or old. Now, what she did here is a fishbone. So she went out and she looked at the different variables that could cause the number of sales to go up or down. So causes that maybe happened before she had the final sales receipts that could result in fewer sales this month than last month. And so she was able to identify really 2 sections that she thought she could really move the needle on. And that was around her competitors, which she noticed had suddenly started to increase. So you can see here she had similar sellers. In October, there were only 3, but then this year, maybe in the holidays, people got some of these woodworking machines, and her sales, or the number of similar competitors in her market, increased significantly on Etsy. So that could have an impact. And she identified here as well her SEO, so where she was coming up in her search ranking. The other thing that happened was Etsy had some design changes. So maybe they've updated kind of the layout of the store, and she hasn't really taken action against that. So those were some of the pieces of the fishbone, the variables that she thought that she could attack that could really result in some improvement. Let's take a look here now at what she actually improved. So she edited the SEO so that she understood the current algorithm and she took advantage of that. She offered some cheaper items. So when she looked at her competitors, she saw that they had some smaller, cheaper items that they could buy. So she started offering some of those as well, that maybe people would come to her store instead of opening that other store. She optimized her page based on the design changes that Etsy had made. She added some new colors. So she actually, in the analyze phase there, went out and talked to some customers who told her, hey, I really wanted this color, or I really want sparkly, right? So she identified some of the colors that people were demanding that she didn't even know about. The other thing that she did is she had like 3 or 4 options when you had to order off of her Etsy page. So rather than having so many options, she split those out. So instead of getting to choose maybe between 3 different puzzles and 15 different colors, now if you want the puzzle with the map on it, you go to the puzzle with the map on it. If you want the elephants, you go to the elephants, right? So she made it so that you had fewer decisions that you had to make at the checkout. Now, what this resulted in, she saw just in the first few months, is she was able to get her ranking back to 1. So she was able to have that impact on the SEO that she wanted. She also saw for the 2 months of the beginning here of implementing these changes, she saw a change. Now, we would want to continue to monitor that so that we had more data points that gave us confidence that this change was going to continue. Now, one thing that she has to really consider here and think about is, what if that SEO changes again? What if that algorithm changes again? What if the design changes again? What if a new seller comes onto the market, right? So she also identified as part of her control plan that she would have a scorecard that they monitored so that she made sure to identify those issues each month before they really impacted her sales. So if she's suddenly search ranking 7, she's going to notice that within 4 weeks because every month she's going to be checking. Now, this helps to sustain those improvements. Now, whether or not you are a solopreneur or you have a big team with you, this activity can be really transformative. It's great to have the documentation, but what's really most important about the A3 is the thinking behind it, that you go through these step-by-step thought processes to identify what's really impacting your process. So before you kind of say, hey, we don't need that template, that's not something that I would look at, I just caution you to think about filling it out, even if it's just in text, so that you go through those different steps, so that you ask yourself these questions. Because the more you start to ask questions like, do I have any data to support that, right? Because at the beginning, she had thought that her sales had been declining the last few months, but actually they had declined back in July and August and kind of stayed that way and just had a little bump over the holidays. So if you went back, you would be able to identify those things, right, with real data so that you can make data-driven decisions and not just make random decisions. So I think, to me, the A3 thinking is really important. It's an absolutely fantastic tool to use as well if you have a new team that you're working with to do business improvements. So it's a pretty good one that I recommend. And let's see what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to take an example of a lawyer, and we are going to look at their workspace. So we're going to look at how easy it is and how frequently they use things in their workspaces, and how we can make more objective decisions about what we keep in our offices or workspaces or even virtual workspaces versus making subjective decisions like, oh, I really like to have 85 books on whatever, right? So tomorrow we're going to give you some examples of what you can do to make that decision more objective, to make it easier for you to see that waste. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that today you take this lesson in A3 thinking. Think about, what problem are you trying to solve right now? Can you ask yourself these questions, these A3 questions, to get down to that root cause, to identify improvements that address that root cause, right? So start asking yourself that question. That control plan is one we often forget as well. How do you sustain those changes? So go through that thinking today. That's your challenge today. And I hope that it helps you to get a little bit better today so that you don't have to work so hard.